Hello and good afternoon. My name is Zulima Chavez, and I'm the Support Center Manager for the Asthma and Allergy Foundation of America, or AFA. This episode is produced independently by AFA and made possible in part by support from Genentech. Today, we're talking about mental health and food allergies with Tamara Hubbard. Tamara is a licensed clinical professional counselor and family therapist with more than 20 years of experience. She is a food allergy parent and the founder of the Food Allergy Counselor. Tamara, welcome and thank you for joining us on today's episode.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, I was super excited for today's conversation. I've had the chance to see some of webinars that you've participated in, so I'm sure our listeners will have a lot of great information and tips from this episode.
I hope so too.
So, for listeners that aren't familiar with your work or your background, can you tell us more about your background and how you got involved in this work?
Sure. So, as you said, I'm a licensed clinical professional counselor, but actually, my training is in marriage and family therapy. So, at the heart of the work I do, I'm thinking like a family therapist. I'm thinking about family relationships. I did not start off in allergy work at all. In fact, I started off in substance abuse work with teenagers and families. And then I went into private practice, did a lot of couples counseling. And then, when my youngest child was 3, he got diagnosed with a food allergy. And so we didn't have food allergies in our family. Didn't really know anything about it other than maybe, at preschool there was a child who had a food allergy. That was the extent of my knowledge. And so when that happened, I became the parent of a child with a food allergy who experiences the same feelings and thoughts as all of the other parents out there who received the diagnosis. And so I spent some time trying to figure out, what does this life look like with food allergies? And then I decided that, in looking at like what that felt like as a parent, that there needed to be more resources out there for the families. And so I started by just building a blog called the Food Allergy Counselor and did some articles and put that out there. And next thing I know, I had people reaching out to me all over the country saying, "Can you do therapy with me?" Because I'm also a therapist. So I know this as a parent, but I know this as a clinical therapist as well. And sadly, because of licensing laws, therapists and doctors can't work outside of the states that they're licensed in. So unless somebody is in Illinois or Florida, I can't work with them. And so that's what helped me decide to start the Food Allergy Counselor Directory, which is now the directory that's part of the Academy of Food Allergy Counseling, which we grew into, a nonprofit that is educating therapists as well as providing a directory for families. Because I can't work with all these families, and I knew that there had to be other therapists out there who knew this work or wanted to get into food allergy counseling. Next thing you know, that grows. And now I've written a book. And so it all started with my son's diagnosis, feeling this as a parent myself, and then realizing there was a lack of resources and deciding to jump in and get them started.
Yeah, congratulations on your book. And the Food Allergy Counselor Directory is a resource I share often in our community and with our families. Yeah, it's a great resource. And I always like to encourage people. It really helps when you work with someone who understands and is specialized in the area that you're experiencing challenges or you're feeling overwhelmed. And so having that food allergy knowledge and pairing it with counseling and therapy is so valuable to really feel heard and understood from that perspective.
Yeah, and it's a fairly new niche. I mean, those of us who are in this niche are sort of helping to build it. It really isn't an established niche yet. If you think about things like diabetes and cancer, they've got a lot of mental health and emotional wellness support built into a lot of their patient care, and we don't have that
Right.
yet as a regular thing. We're working towards that. So we're building the plane as we're flying it, but there's more and more of us out there to help the families, whether it's through diagnosis or after an allergic reaction or through ages and stages, all the things that feel stressful and hard.
Yeah, and you kind of touched on this, but food allergies are more than just a physical condition. They have emotional and social impacts on families, and families can feel stressed and overwhelmed as they manage food allergies and just navigate everyday life. Can you talk more about those common impacts?
Yeah. So if I'm looking at a family as a family therapist who has a diagnosis of food allergy, maybe one of the kids does, or multiple kids do, this is impacting the entire family. These diagnoses are not just diagnoses for the individuals who have them, it's the entire family that is impacted. So if we look at parents, right, we look at the parent child relationship, we've got a parent who's just trying to figure out how to parent in general and then raise a child who eventually learns how to manage their own food allergy. If we look under the cover of that, there's all sorts of things. There's anxiety, there's stress, there's trauma, there's hypervigilance, there's financial impacts, there is constant stressors, constant worrying about reactions, constant fear. And I say constant, it's not constant for every family. I want to clarify that. Some families adjust to these diagnoses just fine, right? They kind of have a little learning curve, they get into it and then they manage it fine. For other families, there's high anxiety and maybe that high anxiety never kind of goes away. And so they're constantly living in fear of an allergic reaction. And so it's constant for a lot of families on their mental health and their emotional well-being, and that impacts parent-child relationships, that impacts marital relationships, the parent-parent subset. That can also impact sibling relationships as well, right? A child who has a food allergy and a sibling who doesn't, and the entire family's experiences in life. There's a lot that, this diagnosis comes, there's a lot there that impacts the entire family system.
Yeah, and many times when people think of food allergies, sometimes they just go to, oh, there's just some dietary changes. That's kind of where their mind goes, but it goes far beyond that to where it does have deeper impacts.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the core, food allergy safety is about making sure that we stay away from our allergens and we stay safe. But how you stay safe, there's a lot that goes into that, the planning, the preparing, the thinking about, there's worrying, right? And then beyond that, it's even how do we determine what's safe, safe enough, and not safe? And that's some of the stuff I talk about in my book a lot is families need to figure that out with their allergy care team, because if we base that off of anxious thoughts, everything's going to be extremely unsafe and we're going to avoid a lot more than we need to for medical purposes.
Yeah, and that can feel very overwhelming. And so, focusing only on allergy safety can have impacts on a child's normal growth and development. It can also affect the development of allergy management skills. Can
Yeah.
you unpack that and talk more about that?
Sure. So when I talk about safety, so in acceptance and commitment therapy, which is the type of which is the theory I like to use in my work with allergy parents, values talks about the things that are that matter to us and that are important, the ways in which we want to live. And so, of course, as allergy families, the number one priority is safety, keeping our kids safe, keeping the family safe from allergic reactions. Sometimes and oftentimes what happens is we tend to focus only on safety. And so that's tunnel vision. And so when we're only focused on keeping a child safe and avoiding allergic reactions, oftentimes we're not thinking about other things that are important to us, such as connectedness, at a family gathering or a social gathering, right? Adventure, the value of having adventure and being courageous, like traveling and going out and seeing things as a family. And so unfortunately, when we are only focusing on allergy safety, we're oftentimes not helping our family engage in all these other life experiences that we can do safely, but that our anxiety tells us we can't. And that impacts quality of life. And we see that in the research studies too. Quality of life can be and often is impacted for families managing food allergies. So my encouragement is to help families say, instead of it being, let's focus on allergy safety and avoiding reactions, or going to the family gathering or a social outing, it's how can we focus on safety and being connected and going and being social. So it's talking about how can we be safe and still do things that matter.
Yeah, that is so important. A question we get often is like, how can parents or caregivers teach their children skills to manage their food allergies? So there's always the concern of, are they too little for me to encourage them to do XYZ? What's a good age for them to advocate for themselves and kind of take more of that ownership? So, how can these parents and caregivers empower their children? And what does that look like?
Looks like starting from the very young ages. one, two, three, narrating, verbalizing as you're doing things as the parent, right? Saying, oh, these are, this contains nuts, this contains dairy, and that's not safe for you. And while the child is still too young to really quite get it and maybe, do anything about it, they're hearing the parents talk about it. They're becoming familiar with allergies and allergens and protocols. And so from that point, so again, I don't want parents to never talk about this. I want them to start from very, very young ages and sort of make it a normal part of life. We don't want to make it this big, scary thing. We want to make it a normal part of their life so the kids don't feel ashamed of it, embarrassed about it, or anxious about it beyond what they need to. From there, I encourage parents to think about this as steps of teaching their kids skills. And so from the 2-year-old who's hearing the parents just go through their day narrating allergy safety, it turns into helping them identify their allergens, helping them say, I'm allergic to whatever they're allergic to. That's self-advocacy skills. As the kids get into elementary school, we want them to do more of the self-advocacy skill building, saying, I can't have that, or is that safe for me? So I want them to think about each stage, they build those skills so that by the time they become a teenager and young adult, we're not rushing to fill their bucket in their toolkit with all these skills that we've been avoiding because we've been controlling everything out of our anxiety. So start it from very early on and then keep building at each age and stage.
Yeah. And even so, taking a step back to specifically parents and caregivers, what are some strategies and tools that can support their well-being as they're navigating this? I can only imagine like how overwhelming it would feel if they don't have the tools and resources to do this. So what are those strategies and tools for dealing with life stressors?
The first one I always like to talk about is self-compassion. And I know that that gets thrown around on the internet as like some fluffy word, it's like, oh, is it pop psychology? No, it's a research backed strategy for humans in general, but certainly parents of kids with food allergies and allergic conditions to utilize to help during the stressful and challenging times. When we're a parent of a child with these diagnoses, we can get real self-critical and we can, have these stories that tell us we're not a good enough parent, we're not keeping our child safe enough, we're not whatever enough. We compare ourselves to other families managing these allergic conditions, and usually we come out on the bottom. And so what the first thing I'd encourage parents to do is to pause and engage in self-compassion. And that looks like you can simply check that by saying, would I say what I'm saying to myself to a friend who's in this situation? So let's say a parent misses something on a label, because it happens, and an allergic reaction happens. Doesn't even have to be anaphylactic, could just be a mild reaction. But then the guilt and the self-blame
Right.
comes in, right? We can't stop those emotions from happening, and they're there because you love your child and you feel bad. However, beating yourself up about that is not helpful and actually derails any progress and ability to move forward through the emotions you're feeling and get back to a better place. So I would say in those experiences where maybe we make a mistake or we're feeling like we're not doing a good enough job keeping our child safe and parenting them, is my internal talk really negative? And if so, would I say that to a friend? And if not, I shouldn't be saying that to myself either.
Yeah, that's so important, extending like grace and compassion to yourself. It reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend where she, there's like, oh no, I'm afraid I'm going to make a mistake. And, what are people going to think? And she said, as long as you remain like teachable, like just hungry to learn, hungry to like kind of learn the lesson from what happened, like that's so important. And again, that grace where you're not beating yourself up, you're learning every day is a new learning opportunity and experience.
That's hard in allergy life because we want certainty and we want risk free and we want things to
Hmm.
be 100% safe. And the reality is that's often not going to be the case where everything's going to be
Yeah.
100% safe. There's 100% certainty. There's no doubt about something. So we do have to navigate life with these uncertainties, and we do have to give ourselves grace when we do make mistakes. And it's also another thing to remind ourselves is not every mistake is going to result in an allergic reaction, and not every allergic reaction will result in anaphylaxis either. And not every time we have anaphylaxis will it result in a fatality. And so it's sort of walking back also these anxious thoughts that we have so we can get back to better perspective and then move forward even when we feel anxious about living with food allergies. But being kind to ourselves about that is a core
Hmm.
skill I hope that parents start utilizing more. We all need to.
Right, right. Yeah, and for our listeners, just great reminder that we have to take a deep breath, extend
Yes,
compassion.
yes, yes. In fact, do it right now. Let's all just take a deep
Yes.
breath and go, life can be hard, but we're doing the best we
Yeah.
can. And maybe we don't feel good about this allergy parenting thing yet, but we're
Hmm.
working on it and we're getting there.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And, another thing that can be incredibly stressful is when your child is at school. And
Yes.
so, we're in the fall, students have gone back to school. This can be very stressful for families, especially if a child has started a brand new school. And so, what recommendations do you have for parents to help manage their stress and concerns during this period?
Ideally, that would start before school starts, right? And here we are in the school year. So if you've missed that window, it's okay. Don't panic about it. But ideally, I would like parents to reach out to the school prior to the school year starting and have conversations about how their child's allergies will be managed at school, share protocols that work, put in place a plan to keep the child safe. But once we get into the school year, number one, we're managing just sort of communication with the staff and the teachers, making sure that what they say they will do is happening and following up with any questions and concerns we have. And to do that with care and compassion, kindness, firmness, but care and compassion, because we want to be a team working together with schools. I know sometimes we come in hot and heavy, and that doesn't often result in good, workable solutions to keep the child safe and work together to do that. But the other part is managing the thoughts about this, right? It's stressful, especially if it's kindergarten or the first time they're away from you all day and in school. And I think the important thing is to remind yourself that your mind might be having all these worry thoughts about they won't be safe. How can they care for my child the same way I care for my child? Will they care for my child and notice a reaction if it happens? Stop, pause, remind yourself that those are just thoughts. Thoughts are not outcome predictors. They're not future, things that are absolutely going to happen. They're just thoughts. And try and also have thoughts that entertain the best case outcome and most likely outcome, right? So when our mind is telling us my child is going to school and he's going to have an allergic reaction, there's going to be stress this year, it's going to be hard. That's one thought. Maybe, maybe not, but also think about the fact that your child is there engaging with their peers and having a good time and enjoying school, and that maybe it looks like the staff is doing a good job keeping them safe, right? So our minds are going to think about these scary things. We can't delete those thoughts, but we also want to make sure that we're not sort of leaning into those without evidence that something that the school isn't doing a good job. If the school isn't doing a good job and the child, they're not managing the allergies well, that's when I encourage families to say, okay, let's set up a meeting. Let's have some more conversations. If we need to get a letter from the allergist to outline what is important in the safety care, we can do that. But let's start with open, honest communication, constant communication so that you can build trust in the staff and in the teachers to keep your child safe, and to remind yourself that your mind is going to have worried thoughts, but that doesn't mean that that's how things are actually going.
Right. Yeah. And, you brought up a good point. It's so important for parents and caregivers to remember that they're going to work as a team with their
Yes.
school and really
Yeah.
fostering that relationship, having those conversations. They know their kids really well. And so they can express, what those needs are, their concerns are. And many times, these are very valid concerns that they may have, and they're wanting to protect their child's safety. And so that could lead to a lot of really great conversations that help a child feel more safe and a parent just feeling more confident in the school's ability to kind of care for their child.
And it's a great opportunity when they start to enter the school system, even at 5 years old in kindergarten, to start talking to the kids and building skills with them. If something
Mhm.
doesn't feel right or safe, helping them learn to speak up, right? Like I know as
Yeah.
parents, we want to keep everything safe and control everything. But we also, again, that's that balance, reminding ourselves that we have to teach our kids at each age and stage those skills to keep themselves safe, like self-advocacy, like
Mhm.
speaking up, like checking labels, like checking food, right? Like saying no. And even at those young, early ages of school, they can do those things. We can encourage them and teach them to do those things, as well as working with the school staff to keep them safe.
Yeah, and having ongoing conversations like parents with their children is so important because they can also hear any concerns or discomforts that may come up with their child. We also have a lot of great resources on our Kids with Food Allergies website, our school zone, so you can review those resources, share them with schools, and we have a lot of great action plans on there. So I will include resources in the link in the bio below for our listeners. And I'll also share, so for additional support, we encourage our listeners to check out our Kids with Food Allergies online community. And you can also connect with people managing food allergies on this community. There's also the kidswithfoodallergies.org/help website for more resources. And then, of course, we want to make sure families feel heard, seen, and supported through this journey. If there is ever a situation where they find themselves in a crisis, I want to take a moment to mention the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You can dial 988 for 24/7 free and confidential support. So if you ever find yourself in that situation, please take advantage of that free and confidential resource. Before we end today's episode, I wanted to give you an opportunity to share any last thoughts or just closing thoughts for our listeners.
I think my last thought would just be, if you're feeling overwhelmed as a parent of a child with food allergies or allergic conditions, just know that you won't always feel the way you feel today. With time and experience and skill building and community, it won't always feel as intense as it might feel today or after an allergic reaction. And yes, it might feel intense as you go to a new age and stage, but you're going to figure it out. And it is possible to keep our child safe and live fully. Again, that's much of what I talk about in my book, May Contain Anxiety. And so I just want to put that out there as a hopeful reminder that it can feel hard, but it's absolutely manageable to stay safe and live a full life and teach our kids to do the same thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Tamara, thank you for joining us on today's conversation to discuss mental health and resources to empower families managing food allergies. I have greatly enjoyed our conversation, and I hope that this has given listeners a lot to think about and just some great encouragement.
You got this. Thanks for having me on.
We hope our listeners of the Afternoon Chats podcast found this informative and actionable. Don't miss our future episodes, and remember to like and subscribe to our podcasts, which are available wherever you listen to podcasts. Please note, this information presented in our podcast is educational and not intended to provide individual medical advice. Please talk with your healthcare provider about your personal health. If you have questions or want to talk to someone about food allergies, our Kids with Food Allergies online community is always open. You can find it at kidswithfoodallergies.org/join. Before we say goodbye, we'd like to thank Genentech again for their kind support of this episode. Have a good afternoon, everyone.